Hey guys, this is Eric Weingarten with Weingarten Racing. Today's video has two parts. The first part, I'm going to teach you how to save money in building your race car. The biggest savings you can do to save on race car builds. And the second thing, I'm going to tell you how to make money building race car stuff. So that's the two parts of this video, and let's just get into it. So earlier this morning, I was watching a Devin Vanderhoof YouTube video. For those that don't know who he is, he's on YouTube and he does wiring for cars. His main business is actually wiring race cars, and he does that with it. Anyway, he had a whole video where he had laid out all the little stuff. This isn't big stuff. This is all the little stuff you need to get your car to run. So to finally get it to where it would start up, because he does wiring and stuff. And he was showing you just the small stuff. This isn't even the big things. This isn't like an ECU or anything like that. These were all small things like sensors and wires and stuff. Go watch the video, see what I'm saying. But when you add it all up, it was about $9,000 worth of stuff. And when I'm watching it, I'm like, man, that's expensive. But then first thing I thought, and this is how to save you money, is I thought, you don't need half that. You don't. And you might be saying, yeah, you do. I watched your video. He's a smart guy. You don't need that. The biggest thing you could do to save money in your race car, don't do EFI. Don't do EFI. That's the biggest thing I can say to you. So I know you're looking at me, you're like, oh, here we go, boomer. First off, not a boomer, and I got nothing against EFI except for this. I think it's the biggest scam that's been passed on to the hot rodding community. Because for the most part, EFI does not make you faster than a carburetor or other stuff. And it's not even necessarily a carburetor or EFI thing that I'm talking about in this video. It's more of your car is too expensive so you don't finish it versus going to the track and enjoying the car. That's really what this is. So in an NA application, carburetor versus EFI, on the dyno, I could tell you for sure the carburetor is better. But even at the track, they're virtually identical until you look at cost. So if we just stick with the NA part of this, right, and we're going to get to other stuff in a second. If you look at the NA cost of it, most people only think of the EFI. Like you got your, let's say you want the Dominator ECU. That's all they think about. That's the only cost you have. That's what they have in their mind. When you look at a carburetor setup, a typical really good carburetor is about $1,300. You could find ones cheap on Facebook Marketplace, and if you have some knowledge or just watch YouTube videos, you can actually make those work really, really well. And no, it's not as hard as everybody makes it out to be. That's always the thing for the EFI. But you can get them for really cheap on there. If you were like, well, what about EFI? Go to Facebook Marketplace, take the gamble on an EFI system someone's getting rid of? I don't think so. And then the next thing people say whenever I do that is like, well, then what about the Sniper and the throttle body EFI? First off, I have a throttle body Sniper EFI on my S10. I have owned 4 units and 2 have failed, okay? So, I have pretty good experience with these. I know how to work them and stuff. The 50% fail rate. And I would say, if you don't believe that, just look at the Holly forums. I am not alone in that. You can also look at other throttle bodies and you're about in the same position. Matter of fact, if you really want to find a cheap carburetor, what you need to do is find someone that's got one that ran good on this car and they want a Sniper EFI, because they're going to sell that carburetor for next to nothing and they want to buy it back from you. You can even make money when they can't get that Sniper or the other throttle body stuff to work. But we're dealing with strictly, EFI stuff. Now that's all great, because I know you're like, well, that's awesome, but most people don't do NA stuff. We do power adders. Second thing you could do to save yourself money. Everybody wants to go right to turbos, because turbos themselves, if you look at the cost of a turbo, it's pretty cheap. Even some of these turbo kits are pretty cheap. But then they want to go to the EFI, and then that ends up expensive. Because if you look at just like the Dominator EFI, just the ECU is like $2,300. That's just the ECU. You're not going to get anything else. You're not going to get the wiring harness, which they like to hit you hard with that for like another $900. And then you have all the sensors what Devin Vanderhoof had, and wiring is super critical with an EFI and not near as critical on the carbureted stuff. You can get an ignition box for like $400 or $500, a coil for $200, and with the carburetor, and you're good to go. Your fuel system's cheaper, your fuel pump's cheaper, your regulator's cheaper, everything's cheaper. You're out at the track enjoying time. What happens is, and this happens more than you think, okay? And if you have buddies, you understand this. Once you get into it, because it sounded like a great deal, granted, There are so many advantages for EFI as far as data monitoring and all that stuff. Fantastic. They did race for decades without that stuff, by the way, just so you know. And they did pretty good. But what happens is you get into that and you're just like, well, I've got enough money for the Dominator, I got enough money for this, and then starts the other thing. EFI is death by 1,000 cuts. And what ends up happening is your car ends up on jack stands, and the guy with a carburetor is at the racetrack enjoying his time. So you might be faster, but not if you're on jack stands. You're gonna have to Fred Flintstone that. So when we go to power adders, they have blow-through carburetors. They work well with turbos and supercharger stuff too. Is it as good as EFI? No, but it's also dramatically cheaper. So that really does help you out. So one of the things I'm trying to get at with this is if you're really wanting to go to the track, because that's our goal, is to get ourselves to the track. And we're not rich, okay? The majority of hot rodders, we're just not. That's not how it goes. We gotta, bills to pay, economy's hard, or whatever else. So we have to save up to get certain parts, but you still want to go to the track. So goal being to get to the track. So how could you do it cheaper? Go get a Facebook Marketplace engine. Sometimes they're a gamble. I literally saw a 5.3 LS on Facebook Marketplace yesterday for 600 bucks. You go get that. Now you could say you could do a stock ECU and then that would work for your EFI if you really wanted to do that. As soon as you do the Holley stuff, ching, 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 it's just money. Or this is the cheap route. Go get a carbureted intake, put the carburetor on it, and the MSD makes a box for it, run out and go have fun. You'll have plenty of fun. And you're like, well, I want to go faster. What about that turbo setup? Hold off on that. Just get a nitrous kit. Because for the most part, most of you out there will be happy if you could get your car to run a 9 or a 10 or maybe a 9. 8s are way out there, but 9s you're pretty good with, especially since you look at what you got to do to your car to get it to go faster. You could easily do that with a nitrous kit, okay? A 5.3 on nitrous, I don't know if you're necessarily going to get there. You're definitely be in the 10s, for sure. We're not talking like hosing the living crap out of it, but you're so much happier. Your goal is to get to the track. That's cheap. Get to the track. Then save your money to get to the better stuff. Then you can maybe save for a turbo and with a blow-through carburetor, and then really, really save. Like whatever people say that you need for an EFI, double that. And then you could save that up by little sensors at a time, because that's one thing about EFI. It's like, well, it's not that bad. It's just a $120 sensor, and then another $120 sensor, then a $500 PDM or whatever. That's how it happens. But you could save that up and buy those easier. Save that up and then eventually switch to the EFI. But the benefit of this whole thing is you can be out enjoying your carbureted car, nitrous, at the track while the other guy who's got his car sitting up on jack stands isn't doing anything because he can't have all the pieces to put together. Because once your car gets on jack stands, this is true for life. Once your car gets on jack stands and you got to save up to get stuff, inevitably something comes up. It happens to every single person, blue collar people. Oops, wife's pregnant. Ugh, car's gone. At least when you had it in there and you had an engine in there, you could go enjoy it and you were enjoying it during the time. Because nothing makes your wife want you to sell your race car when it's been sitting on jack stands for 2-3 years because you just don't have enough to quite finish it. So biggest tip to save money, avoid EFI. Not because it's like carburetors are superior, it's because wallet gets you to the track, okay? So get going first, avoid EFI, save the money, and then do it. If you don't believe me, watch the Devin Vanderhoof video because it's 100% correct. You'll end up getting all that. And honestly, he probably could have thrown in more stuff. So please, please, please do that. Because carburetor is simple. Just to give you an idea, because they make it sound so incredibly hard, there are so many dirt track cars that don't take $10,000 wiring systems. They're working off a battery. They don't even have an alternator and a cheap ignition coil, and they run seasons. You can run a nitrous kit on it. You'll be happy. If you really want to save up your money and you really want to go fast, you're like, I don't really like the LS, save up your money, go on Facebook Marketplace, find a big block. Just to give you an idea, my 540 big block that I had in my Camaro, that was back when it weighed 3,000 pounds, so somewhat lighter than some of your cars. But that 540 was a pump gas deal. So it's pump gas. I did use it for engine masters, 24-degree head, stud mount rockers, true pump gas. Ran 91 octane, added that race gas additive though. I don't know if that actually helped or not. That car went a 916 NA, okay, when it had that motor in it. It's faster now, obviously, because now it's on race gas, which is probably a mistake on my part because it's really hard to get the track when you spend so much on fuel. But that was a joy. Easy to take to the track, instant nines. And if I just had like a little 250 shop, it would have been in the 8s. So save up your money. You could find those deals on Facebook Marketplace. Not all, it is a gamble, but splurge for the big block and be happy. And then save your money, and a turbo LS is great, a turbo big block's better. Okay. All right, that does it for that. Now let me tell you how you can actually make money at racing. How can you make money doing race car stuff? So this might be controversial, and this might be getting myself into hot water, but I don't care. There are 3 careers that you could do that will make yourself money doing race car stuff. And I'm going to tell you ones you should avoid. So if you guys know, I'm a cylinder head porter. I port cylinder heads, I port manifolds, do some dyno tuning as well and all that stuff. The thing you should avoid to doing with the business, if you want to be in race car stuff, don't do cylinder heads and don't do engine builds. And you're like, how can you say that? I'm not complaining about my job, by the way, but I'm saying if you actually want to make money so that you can race your car, you don't want to do that. And let me tell you, so I charge $1,400 to port a set of cylinder heads. It takes about 40 hours to do that. So if you do the math, I made $35 an hour. If I was doing like what mechanic rate is or other rates, the port job would be phenomenally more expensive. Phenomenally more expensive. And I'll get to that rate in a little bit. But $35 an hour, some of you are like, well, that's still making really good money. You got to remember this though. To do that cylinder head porting, what did I actually need? And you're like, you just need a die grinder. Incorrect. I have a $50,000 seat and guide machine sitting over there. Probably another $8,000 or $9,000 in tooling to use the seat and guide machine because it's not included when you buy it. I then have a $12,000 flow bench, about $5,000 in slider plates, bore adapters, and whatnot to make this flow bench work. I've got a $10,000 valve refacer over there to reface the valves. A $45,000 mill over there to surface heads. So over $100,000 to do the actual port work to get what you need. Okay, that's a lot of money. Now, granted, it gives you a lot of fame. You know your name's on stuff. People are like, that guy makes power. But here brings in catch number 2 with doing this career. In most of the other, when I talk about the 3 other things, you don't have to be the best at those 3 things that I'm going to get to. You do have to be the best at cylinder heads because no one wants the guy that makes cylinder heads for the guy that finished 2nd or 5th. They want the guy who did number 1. So you have to be the best. That's extremely hard. Extremely hard. So that's a lot of stress there. But the other thing that has to do with cost, besides that, is other cylinder head guys will cut each other down the bits. What I mean by that is I would love to charge more for cylinder heads. As long as people pay it, it seems fine. Here's a problem. Some other dude will just make their height bigger so they seem like they're the best because everybody wants the best. Remember that. In cylinder head world, some guys just to make them seem like the best. Facebook seems to be the best place for that, by the way. You make yourself seem like you're the best, so you got that conquered. Then all you have to do is low cut the other guy. So cylinder head guys will low cut each other constantly. So before long, the cylinder heads are like, you're not hardly making any money, is what I'm trying to say. Now, I'm not saying I'm going broke by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not like, if you saw the tax returns, you're like, golly, you could do a lot of other stuff to make more money. You're correct. Not complaining, but I want to be honest with you. If you're like, I love what you do, great, awesome. I love what I do too. But understand, if you actually want to make money to race your car, there are other fields. To make matters worse, that's just cylinder heads. If you want to really lose money, be an engine builder. They're worse than that. Those guys will cut each other down too. And I know you like to think when you see a $15,000 or $18,000 price tag on an engine, you're like, those guys must be making bank. Here's what you don't know. Most of those parts are expensive. Even at their dealer cost, they're still expensive. And worse yet, most of those parts that they get are actually messed up. And then they got to spend labor time to fix them to make them usable. Then you have the same thing. Everybody wants the best engine builder, so other engine builders build their influence on Facebook or wherever else, And then they'll undercut each other until there's hardly any profit in it. It wouldn't surprise you guys, or me at all, but because I've been around this enough, to know a $15,000 engine, some of those guys are lucky to make $2,000. And some make less than that. So avoid those. So if you actually want to make money in the racing industry, those sound glamorous. You like it, you make 1,000 horsepower. It's fun stuff, absolutely. They don't make you money. But here are the 3 things that will make you money. And they're in their biggest desire and need right now. The 3 things are wiring, that's the big one, chassis, and paint. Those 3 jobs work completely different than engine building, cylinder head porting, and those ones will make you money. Now, I know I'm going to make some people mad when I say this, but let's look at it. $110,000 just to do cylinder heads. Think about the engine builder. He's like, that's it? Shoot, I got a $150,000 Rottler hone to make the best finish. I got a $150,000 Rottler block machine just to machine the whole block. I got a $100,000 dyno just to make $2,000, by the way. So they still have the cylinder head stuff too. If you're doing, we'll start with wiring, because that one's probably of the 3, the least profitable, but still makes way good. What do you got to have? What piece of equipment costs more than $10,000 that you have to do that? Most of it's like hand tools. Maybe you got an extra ECU so you could test stuff, things like that. Your knowledge that you have to have is pretty good, but you cannot say that the knowledge to do cylinder head porting or engine building, I think it's a bit more. And that may be because I'm in that, but I know it's more. You still have to have a talent to know how to wire. You have to have a talent to know how to hide stuff, what stuff's out there, all that. So it's not like they're not talentless. It takes a lot, right, to know how to do it correctly. But also, the guy that's going the second best or the best wirer in the world and the second best wiring guy in the world, their cars are going to run the same at the track. Now, you can't be said for the best engine builder, the second best engine builder, first cylinder head guy, second cylinder head guy. Do you see it? Here's the other thing, and this is the biggest thing and reason why they can make money. The wiring guys, the chassis guys, and the paint guys typically don't work per job. So for instance, I said I charge $1,400 to port a set of heads. If there's something messed up with that head, I usually have to just take care of it. Like if it pokes a hole, I got to weld it or something, because maybe the casting got, not my fault, they just sent it in, but somehow the casting shifted in. There's a problem, I got to fix it, it's on my dime. The chassis, wiring, and paint guys don't do that. It's $130 an hour. If there's a problem, they got to fix it, it takes time, you're paying for that. They typically don't do per jobs. So you're making $130 an hour pretty much guaranteed unless the customer just doesn't pay or they're like, stop for whatever reason. Way better deal. $130 an hour versus $35 an hour with $110,000 worth of equipment. That's what you need. Listening to Devin Vanderhoof too, if you think, well, is there really that much of a need? He said he's a year out. A year. I'm behind on the cylinder head porting about 5 to 7 months. Really, we can go into 8 to get head porting done. And that's hand porting. I know some of you are like, well, you should have got a CNC machine. The CNC machine is $350,000, by the way. It's $1,500 if you want someone else to digitize your head. Trust me, I've done it a bunch. And it costs about $400 to $800 to have your heads cut. So you really, at that point, you do more work and you make less money. But back to them, you have not as much as expense on the capital side as far as the machine work you got to have, parts inventory you got to have, and you could just do it a year out, a year. So there's definitely a need for that, okay? Definitely a need. The next one's chassis guys are the same way. There are so many people right now that have their car in chassis and paint body hell, where it's been there for years, the guy hasn't made that much progress, but they keep billing them $135 or $150 an hour to work on that car. Now, chassis builders do require a little bit more equipment because, one, you have to have a table. If you're going to do a full chassis, you have to have, obviously, the better welders, maybe a metal brake and that sort of stuff. So you are out more equipment actually to do chassis stuff, pipe benders and that sort of thing. The guy I use is Kurt Riffle. He's up in Kansas. Now, a lot of the chassis guys, they'll quote you a cost, what they think it's going to cost. And Kurt, when he did my car, he quoted it, and that's what it was. But that's not always the case. They even say that whenever you're there. It could go higher because if I got to go through this or this, it's still $135 an hour. So it can go over that, and you still pay. Cylinder heads, that's extremely rare, where we could pull that off. I mean, like, you know what, I actually took longer. It's only on the jobs where it's usually repair, which those jobs always suck. And typically, if you're into too much of expensive on a repair, you'll call the guy and like, hey, I got it done. You said, by the way, they gave the okay for it. I got it all done. And they're like, ooh, that's really expensive. I can almost get a new one for that. And then you don't hear from them again, and you spend all that labor time and you never get paid. Now, chassis shops may have that problem as well, but you don't have the problem with someone could just go buy a new chassis. You get what I'm saying? So that's a huge need too, because most of you know that chassis stuff takes forever. I also use Josh Gray at Skyview Racing here in Porter. Great job, same thing. Both those positions, I've said, the wiring and the chassis, are $35 an hour. So they work, they get paid. There's a lot of work here that doesn't get paid. I'm not saying they don't have little stuff maybe they don't get paid for, but their profit margin is much higher. And the third thing, which is probably the greatest need, and we all can appreciate this, is paint and body. Now, I've got someone painting Bishop's Nova, and I'm not talking about him necessarily here, but many of you have your car also in paint body hell, where it's been sitting there for years. You have spent X amount of money because they keep saying, hey, I'm working on it this much, so you owe me this much money because I've got this much done, but it's not done. And it's been years, and they just don't get it done. One of my good friends, Tony, he's a prime example of this. He had a car in a paint and body shop for 2 years. He gave them $17,000. He would go in and check on it. It's like, oh, I'm really close. He finally had enough and had to pick it up. It was only in primer and not close to being ready for paint. Yeah, that happens more often than you'd think. So those things really get tied up, because chassis shops, even Josh, what I just mentioned, he's over a year out on chassis work. So there's definitely a need for those. Like, I would love to have more bars in the S10, because then I'd try to go faster. But the time, weight, and the cost. So that is expensive. But those jobs you definitely can do to make money, guaranteed. The wiring, you're like, no, there's not a need for that. Even here, because of the explosion of EFI, remember I told you it costs more? The wiring thing is far taking off because of EFI, because it requires way more wires. And there's always going to be unscrupulous people that are doing any business, but they can happen anywhere. But you still have to have it wired. So there's going to be a need for people to wire the car. So those 3 jobs will pay the bills. Those will help you if you really want to make money at stuff. And I think I was going back to one of the guys. Man, I'll just leave that off. But anyway, those 3 jobs will make you money, and you should really consider those. If you want to actually get your car to the track, consider not using EFI to start. So maybe in the future, not to start. Anyway, a little bit longer of a story. Do those 3 things, you'll make money. Carburetor, ignition box, nitrous. You'll be plenty happy until you could save for the better stuff. Guys, thanks for watching. Remember, I'm no Superman. I did race Superboy. You guys take care.